Hello, it's Nikki. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you so much for your time. And you are in New York City right now, right?
I am, yes. I'm in
Mhm.
medical school.
Where are you in New York City?
I attend school up in Harlem, so
Mhm.
I'm in the city, just a little bit north of
Okay.
Manhattan.
So, yeah, before we begin, would you like to tell us where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born in India, and I lived there for the first 4 years of my life before moving to the States, and then I pretty much lived all over. I lived in Kansas, Indiana, New Jersey, a couple places in Massachusetts. Then I moved down to Atlanta, and then I went to Florida for undergrad at USF, and then now I'm in New York to attend medical school. So
Mhm.
yeah, I've been pretty much everywhere.
Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
What is Atlanta? How is Atlanta different from Tampa, Florida, for you?
I think, well, the environment and the circumstances that I lived in Florida compared to Atlanta were very different. In Atlanta, I live in a very like close knit neighborhood, so I'm very
Mhm.
familiar with a lot of my neighbors. We're like an extended family essentially. And in Tampa, I ended up moving there alone, mostly because I went for undergrad. So I was a bit more independent on my own. I had to kind of find my own way through living by myself for the first time, balancing out just like school and different priorities and everything. So it was a great experience. I recommend everyone, especially children of immigrants, to
Mhm.
at one point live by themselves just so they can really have the time and the environment to figure themselves out, essentially.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, why do you think it's important for them to live on their own? Because do you think that they are too sheltered?
I think so. I think for me, I grew up in a pretty privileged situation. I never really had to worry about finances and everything. So I was able to be pretty successful in high school. I could do a lot of the things that I wanted. I had my main focus in school, I think, was being successful rather than like achieving a certain goal that other people are dependent on. So I felt like I was living pretty much for myself. Obviously, I had expectations and everything factoring in. And I think one of the biggest reasons that I tell people that it's a really important experience for them to live on their own at some point in their life or another is so that they can kind of get an unfiltered perspective of what they want to do, what kind of people that they are just on their own, things that they like to do. I think that when you're living with other people, like your family, for instance, they are a really big part of your life. And I think that it's very easy to kind of manipulate or reform ideas in your head about what you think you want to kind of fit in with their own expectations and everything. So it was really nice for me because I felt like I was able to explore a lot of things that I didn't think that I'd be able to do if I were living in my parents' place for college. And it was just, it was a good experience because I think I was also able to, I think, get surprisingly more in touch with my culture. I think that a lot of students and people my age feel like their identity is kind of forced on them because they grew up in a household where like they kind of have to participate in religious activities, and then the people that they go to with or go to school with don't necessarily share those same beliefs. So I think it's hard to balance the two different identities that I specifically was given. I felt like I had to be one way in front of my friends at school and one way in front of my parents to kind of satisfy both expectations. So I
Mhm.
think that living alone has really helped me appreciate my culture and really connect with being Indian in an American society while
Mhm.
also pursuing the things that I want and then like having friends that support my goals and everything.
Very nice, thank you. So you think if a child is growing up in until high school, they're living with their parents all the time, so their expectations and parents' expectations can be kind of not may not be very clear in the child's mind because they think this is
Yeah.
all there is to achieve, right? And how
Mhm.
can how would I want something different because this is what they want and this is everybody else in the society is doing in my community anyway, right?
Hmm.
But what you're saying is stepping away from your family and spending 4 years in college also lets you know that there are other things, there are other ways of being, right?
Hmm.
So, do you think you also mentioned about you um, being someone else in front of your parents, and then when you're with your friends, you have a whole different personality, and how easy it is for you to switch on and switch off and transition between the two, for anybody?
Um, I think one of the biggest issues that I've had with like related to this personality thing is compartmentalization. So I feel like I had to compartmentalize the person I was in front of like my friends, and then the person I was in school in front of my professors, and then like the person I was in front of my parents. So I realized that I think that compartmentalization aspect came in a time of necessity where I was trying to like fulfill everyone's expectations for me, like when I was playing the role of a friend, a sister, a daughter, a student. So I realized that it's not necessarily switching personalities. I think it's more so there are different aspects of my personality that I increase or decrease based on the surroundings that I'm in. Um, I felt that growing up, I felt like very like a sense of inauthenticity because I felt like I was being different, acting different in front of like my parents and then other people. But I realized that no one is really the same in like different situations that they put themselves in. So it's just different parts of your personality, different parts of yourself that you choose to display based on the circumstance. So yeah, I it was not necessarily easy to switch. It just I felt like it was very natural and it took me a while to come to terms with that's just who I am. There is like one aspect of my personality and the other may not exactly line up to T with it, but it doesn't have to.
Do you think some not? I mean, you said you've come from a pretty privileged background and probably
Mhm.
very educated parents, right? But do you
Yeah,
think that sometimes the some immigrant families can try to enforce or impose their own culture on the child while the child is growing up in
yeah,
America, and they can be torn or confused about what is the right thing to do, be in America because you live in America, you go to school, you talk to people, and then you come home, you live in another culture. And do you think it can be a little bit too much, too overwhelming for the child who's growing up in
for
two
sure.
cultures? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I was definitely in that situation too. I felt like when my parents were growing up, their biggest goal was to come to America.
Mhm.
So I think based off of the kind of life that they lived, obviously not nearly as privileged as the life that they've given me, but I think that they had a very survival mindset.
Mhm.
So they were able to kind of turn off things that they wanted to do and focus on things that needed to be done for them to achieve a goal because their future family, their kids, their spouses, they kind of depended on them being able to be successful and in a financially stable position. So compared to like me, since I have the financial stability that my parents provided, I think for me, I was able to sit back and kind of question a lot more in my life and in society and everything than they like had been able to necessarily or they had been able to focus on. So I think that, yeah, it definitely does. I think there's a big disconnect in the way that they approach problems versus the way I approach problems. Like, for example, if I was in school, school was really like very emphasized, education is really emphasized in my family. So if I was feeling any sort of burnout, I think the way that me and a lot of people who can relate to like being the child of an immigrant family, the way we're kind of approaching the topic is, oh, we're experiencing burnout. Maybe take a little bit of time to like enjoy, do something you enjoy, relax, like take a break, and then get back to the task. Versus for them, it was more so I just have to get it done
Right.
so that I can move on to the next thing and do everything I need to do to be successful. So I think in terms of problem solving and approaching those things, there was a big disconnect. So because of that, and then them thinking from being in a traditional family that they that the elders deserve respect and that their word is law, essentially, in family. I think that definitely caused a lot of rifts and a lot of arguments. So it took a lot of work on both our ends to be able to reach a common ground. And obviously, the older I got, the easier I got, or the easier it got for me to be able to communicate with them. But when I was living with them, particularly, that was when I think we had a lot of disconnect and a lot of arguments. But yeah, it's definitely a lot for a child to deal with, especially when
Because
they're still like developing.
right, because I have had a few Indian American students like you,
Mhm.
and they were writing in their essays that how much their parents, especially fathers, were like trying to control them while they were in college, and adding some kind of a GPS tracker in their phones and making sure they
Mhm.
knew every movement, whether the student was in the dorm or the library or partying. And so the students were going to the
Yeah.
stream of like just leaving the phone in the dorm and then going to the party, which is even more
Yeah.
dangerous. So do you think, like you said, common ground? I mean, is there some trust issue? Are they trying to be overprotective? What can they learn to let the child be?
Yeah, I think it definitely comes from a place of concern for the way our parents think about it. I think they spent so much time, especially for mine, growing up in India, that that is what they consider home. So for them, living in America is like living in a foreign country. And no matter how long they live here, it's still foreign because the culture is so different from what they've grown up in. So I think they have this hyperfixation on their child's safety, and they see like all these news about like racism and things like that coming out. So they get really like scared and they overreach, I think, instead of letting their child make mistakes and learn on their own. And it gets a lot it's very like overbearing. But I think it definitely does come from a good place. It's just that they don't necessarily it's hard for them to realize that they don't necessarily have to go to that extent to ensure their child's safety and also have them be in like a good mental state and maintain a good relationship with them.
Right. Um. So you are a future doctor. You're already studying medicine, right? And do you think,
Mhm.
like when you said that your parents' dream um, was your dream, but when you stepped away from them, you also realized that what you wanted. But looks like did your parents want you to be a doctor, or was it
Oh,
yours?
for sure. Yeah, so they've been telling me since I was a kid, they're like, "Oh, like being a doctor is super respectable in society. Like you
Right.
get so much respect and all this stuff." And I think for them, respect is a big thing because of the society that they grew up in.
Right.
Um, when I was in college, I definitely went through a period of time where I really doubted going into medicine, and I had to sit down and I asked myself for months. I was like, "Is this something I really want to do, or am I doing this for like other people?" And I I paint a lot, so I really wanted to go into art at some point in my
I
life.
think you're
And
also a very good writer.
thank you. Yeah, I really love writing. So I I am definitely a lot of my hobbies are geared more to the arts, but my career path is in the sciences. So I think having to separate those two and try to figure out, is this something I really want to do, or am I doing this because of my like parents or family and things like that. But I think again, having the independence is being able to choose what like how you spend your time a lot of the time. So I spent a lot of my time volunteering, like working as a medical assistant, putting myself in those healthcare situations, but also making time to paint and go to like art museums and do things like that. And I think being able to have the freedom to kind of go down each pathway and see what it's like was what really helped me realized that yeah, I do want to go into medicine. I like have a lot of joy helping other people. I love working in the hospital. So I think to an extent it definitely did in their expectations influence my perception of medicine and being a doctor. But at the end of the day, I feel like having that independence is what made me confident in my own decision to continue pursuing medical school.
So when you were an undergrad in
Mhm.
Florida, you were taking some pre-med courses.
Mhm.
Okay, and you were while you were doing that, you were pretty sure that this is what you wanted to do, and you took the MCAT, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, and can you tell us, for some people who might not know, what does it take to become a full on full time doctor? You take undergrad 4 years, right? and then 4 years
Mhm.
of medical school. Is that right?
Yeah,
Can, can,
it's a
can,
big
can, you,
commitment.
can you tell me how many years does it take the whole thing?
Yeah, so after you graduate high school, you do 4 years of undergrad. This is like a very traditional pathway. There are a lot of non-traditional students in medicine who maybe majored in something completely unscience related and then like did a job later on. And we have like students in our school who are in their 30s, like they're all over different backgrounds. So my experience is a very like traditional experience.
Okay.
So I did undergrad for 4 years. I was a pre med, so I majored in biomedical sciences, minored in psychology. I graduated in 3 years, sorry, and then I took 2 gap years after that. So just getting experience in like a research lab, working as a medical assistant in different clinics. And after that, I did take the MCAT and I ended up coming to medical school. So medical school is going to be 4 years. You have 2 years of preclinical education, so that's when you're sitting in class and taking different classes to learn about medicine. And then the last 2 years would be your clinical years. So you go into hospitals for rotations and you kind of experience a little bit of different fields that are available for you to go into. So when you're in medical school, you also take like step one, COMLEX, depending on whether you're a DO or an MD. Um, and you take a bunch of standardized testing, and eventually at the end of your 4th year you match into a residency program. So residency also depends on what field you're going into. So some are 3 years, some are like 6 to 8 years. So the more complex your residency is and the more clinical fellowships that you take, the longer your residency is going to be essentially.
So about 4 plus 4 plus 6. That is 13 years in total, right?
Yep.
So I'm sorry. I hope I'm not making it sound like you've got a long way to go, Nikki.
I do. You have to come to terms with that before you join medical school, though.
Right, right. But you feel like you're in the right place, right? And this is where your heart
For
is.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for
Very
sure.
nice.
It's very
Yeah,
challenging, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. But then you become a doctor, right?
yeah.
So your parents are still in Atlanta?
They are. Yep.
Okay, okay. And so after 4 years, you probably would like to do the residency in Georgia area. It doesn't matter. You can go anywhere you want to, right?
I'm open to going anywhere. My parents have, although they've put a lot of expectations on me, they have made it clear that my career and my financial stability, or like my stability in life in general, is like my should be my top priority. So whether I'm with my family or not isn't necessarily the question. It's where can I get the best opportunities to be the most successful I can be. So I'm really grateful for that for them. So they've like helped me out a lot in supporting me with what I want to do. So
All right. One final question: Do you, since you grew up, you were born in India, but you lived most of your life in America, right? And
mhm.
all your education is from America. Do you feel American or do you feel Indian? Do you have two identities?
I feel like I have two identities. So when I live in America, I
Mhm.
feel like I'm Indian. But when I go visit India, I
Mhm.
feel I'm not as Indian, but I don't necessarily feel like American.
Right.
So I feel like there's just a different like level to that. And I think mostly because um, I have gone through experiences here, living here, like in America,
Mhm.
um, that maybe like other people may have not gone through because they don't have like an Indian background. But I feel like I can relate to not just other Indians, but a lot of other people of color here. Their experiences might not be the exact same as mine, but I think that they're very similar to an extent. So we're able to kind of bridge that gap and relate to each other. But when I'm in India, I think that initial like ability to relate to other people is kind of not necessarily there. It might be like a language barrier that might be preventing it, or the lifestyles that a lot of people in India live are pretty different. They obviously have the exact same like mentality of being successful, and they have like a lot of support from their parents, at least the people that I visit when I'm in India. But I feel like that initial connection is not necessarily there, maybe because I haven't grown up there and known them very well either. But I think that if I were to relocate to India permanently or like just to live there for a while, I think I would definitely be put in situations where I would be able to relate to like people living there as well. It's just like a matter of time too, because every time I visit India, it's only 2 to 3 months, so you can't really like, and out of those 2 to 3 months, we're only visiting people for a certain amount of days. So I think I've just not really had enough time, and just my surface level impression when I go there is I can't really relate to them. I'm not as Indian as them, but I'm sure that would change if I stayed there for a little bit longer.
Right. Do you speak any other language other than English?
I do. I speak Telugu, but I'm
Telugu.
not super fluent, but I can
Okay.
make my way through.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nikki, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I learned a lot about how to become a doctor.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so good seeing you again.